Hey, welcome back to another NOTCAST, number 339. It is Sunday, it is the 3rd of December, 2023, and today I am talking about the Manic Street Preachers, and I don't even know how many albums this is, 12, 13, that came out in April 2018. The album is Resistance is Futile, possibly the best album to be inspired by the Borg from Star Trek. And also talking about some of the other things that happened around about this time for the band and my relationship to them and my expectations, I guess is probably the word, as a fan of a band, around what you would like a band to do or what you'd like a band to be in future, and how bands don't do what you as a fan want, or what I as a fan particularly want. Now, that's a difficult position for any band to be in, is to carry the weight of other people's expectations. As there is a great quote, which is, the weight of other people's expectations is something that no woman should carry. It's also true about bands, actually. And yet, at the same point, as a fan of a band, we have expectations of what they might be able to do, what they might be able to achieve, what they might be able to experience. And we start, well, really, I mean, the last episode I was talking about the Futurology album and the Holy Bible 20 tour, where the band played the Holy Bible album in sequence, in order, in full, for the first time ever, and the first time they played a Holy Bible theme show since December 1994. I've always felt, at best, sceptical about album in full shows, and the reason for that being is a record and a live show are two very, very different experiences. A record is designed to be listened to and experienced, normally in your headphones, normally on your own. A live show, you're there with thousands of people experiencing the same thing at the same time, the same visuals, the same sounds, normally some of the same emotions. And of course, an album has a different sequence to a show. A gig has, although I think show is probably not the right word, a gig, I think, for the Manics. Because the show implies the Taylor Swift thing, which is very, very regimented. A gig is perhaps something that's a little more freestyle, it's fair to say. And a gig should have a different feel and sequence from a live show, from an album. And a gig should also end effectively on either a climax or a desolate, empty, goodbye everybody ending. Normally, Manic shows, Suede shows, bands that I like, they end on a belter to leave you on a high as you go out from the venue, knowing that you've just experienced something that's fantastic. Not always the case, because in 2016, the band released their Everything Must Go 20th anniversary super mega duper box set, on top of the 1996 release and the 2006 multi-disc version. The multi-disc version from 2006 contains exclusive material not on the Everything Must Go super mega set, and the super mega set of Everything Must Go actually is missing stuff that's on the double CD version of Everything Must Go, released in 2016, because the double CD version of Everything Must Go features the audio soundtrack to the 9X Everything Live home video. So again, you need to get both of the releases to get the material. And the band went on tour and they played Everything Must Go, again, in full, in sequence, in order. And I felt that I was starting to move away from the band. Now, as you might not think so from looking at my record collection and how many old bands I do like, but I'm not a fan of nostalgia. I always think that nostalgia reminds me very much of the Jello Biafra song Nostalgia for a Time That Never Existed. The idea of calling back to history and going, it was really good then. Remember how good that was? And if you were too young to experience it, here's a chance for you to experience it again. It's a bizarre kind of feeling, because having gone through the original Holy Bible and Everything Must Go periods, and in fact every period of the band's career, because I first saw them in January 1992 after they cancelled a show at the Barrel Organ in August 1991, I always felt that I didn't want to re-experience something, because looking at what was happening in 2014 or 2016, what it really brings out to me was that just how much everything had changed in the preceding 20 years, how much the audience had changed, how much the band had changed, how much my feelings towards and emotions that I was experiencing when I saw the band live had changed, and how the passing of time and all its horrible crimes has changed that relationship that we have. So you can't go back to once upon a time and pretend it's like it was. It can't be, in the same way that when somebody steps into the stream, you're not the same person. It's not the same stream. It's not the same water. Everything has changed since you've been to London, the Southern Wonderland, which, by the way, is the best Kingmaker B-side, with a shockingly low number of views on YouTube. So if you want to go, well, what's a good Kingmaker song? Go for it. Everything's changed since you've been to London. But Everything Must Go, the tour in 2016, they were supported by Editors. And Editors are one of my favourite bands. I think they're absolutely fantastic. And I love their work. It's dense and it's dark and I just think it's great. And I had a much better time watching Editors than I did watching Manics, because there was an element of going, I know exactly what's going to happen at the gig. And it's also going to bring to me in sharp relief how you can't bottle that moment again. And all it really does is it draws sharp relief to the differences that exist between the two. So for me, music is something that I want to experience in the here and now. It's not something that I want to experience as a kind of like a reminder of how good things were 20 or 30 years ago. I want music to give me the path through life now. And that's why I'm really interested in bands that do new stuff and new material, because otherwise it's just a museum to how good they used to be. But also, hearing new stuff makes me feel that the band are kind of navigating their way through the same kind of things that I am. So aging, health, death of relatives, friends, lovers, our own fears about mortality, our own fears about what the state of the nation is and what the future is going to look like. All those type of things. And then if you're playing songs that are 20 or 30 years old and you're drawing back everyone to go, hey guys, remember how good we used to be? What you're not doing is you're not tackling the moment in front of you. And we only get one chance to live this particular moment. We only get one chance to live today. So let's make the most of it, even if, in my opinion, the most of it might better be served by sitting on the sofa watching old movies. But that's a choice, as opposed to sitting there and going, I want to go back and I want to revisit the past and I want to kind of experience. Now, looking at it from, let's say, 2016 or 2018, looking back on what's happening in 1996 or 1998, there's an element of going, I've changed, I've matured, I've experienced more things. I wouldn't necessarily want to go and relive that. If someone said to me, do you want to go back and relive, say, a random day in 1996, knowing everything that you've known now? And I'd be like, well, I'd make a heck of a lot of different decisions. I'd probably completely fuck up the past, the shape of the future, as in Back to the Future, or Primer, if you've seen that. But I wouldn't want to do it, because I don't want to live in the past, despite what my record collection tells you. So I'm not a fan of nostalgia tours or album in full tours. I think they're lacking in relevancy and currency, it's fair to say. I totally get that some people want to listen to music that reminds them of what it was like 20 or 30 years ago when they were younger. I get that. I really get that. So I'd love to run upstairs without feeling as tired as I do now. To have that same sense of invincibility that I had 23 years ago when I ran up all 13 flights of the Home Office stairs and got to the top without running out of breath. I couldn't do it now. Not sure I could do 2 flights of stairs, actually. Not even sure I could do 1, actually. But 2016 then, as a Manics fan, was the time when the Manics became 2 bands. One, a nostalgia machine that lived in the past that told you about how good they used to be. And another one, which was kind of slowly but surely making new material that people may not necessarily have really connected with. And for 2016, the only new material that the band released was, of all things, a football single. There has only ever been one good football single released in the history of the United Kingdom. It is World in Motion by New Order. That terrible Echo and the Bunnymen song, Let Us Never Pretend It Happened. And this being the Welsh rugby team, I think is it Welsh rugby? Welsh sport? Welsh football? I don't know. A Wales sport ball kind of theme thing. As you can probably tell, me and sport, we don't get on. And it's called Together Stronger, Come On Wales. And I listened to it recently and I was like, well, does it mean anything? Does it do anything? And I'll be really honest, it doesn't. Because if you are agnostic about sport, if you don't feel entirely comfortable necessarily about national identity and flags, then the idea of doing a sports song celebrating a national team is a little weird for a band that once said great artists have no country. It was also a little weird if you're agnostic about sport as well. Is that the song was filled with so many references to football and sporting events that effectively you've almost felt like you had to sit an exam to fully understand the song, and it was essentially meaningless if you don't follow sport. It was so fucking niche in its existence. It wasn't even up there with Adam and Joe's ball, footy, let alone anything else. So this was a really disappointing record, and the band haven't played it live. Not surprised why. It's not very good. But to me, I was listening to it and going, I don't get it. I mean, is there something to get, or is there nothing to get? I don't know. And so that and the experience of watching them play Everything Must Go in full, and I kind of felt we're going in different directions. Now, sounds like I'm going to be harsh to the Manics. Actually, I am, because I hold the bands I love to a higher standard than some bands. If it's a band like Status Quo, I know they're going to be crap. I just do. They're going to make, Dr. Feelgood sound like Slayer or the Beatles. It's going to be chugga, 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 and I'm going to be like, right, so you've set the bar very, very low, and that's going to be okay. Whereas for something like the Manics, I'm like, this is a band that quoted Nietzsche on their covers, a band that had songs about everything, bands that kind of showed me a map through life when life was confusing and made me feel less alone in times of solitude, made me feel less like I was the only sane person in the world on many, many occasions, especially when I was younger and I saw the world in a slightly different way. And the Manics were a band that to me spoke to me and talked about the hypocrisy of life and the challenges of life and the way in which things like identity and intelligence and articulacy and capitalism and all those type of things made life difficult to somebody who wasn't very old and wasn't very experienced and certainly didn't have very much money. So, and then you get to the point where, as Scroobius Pip sang, the Manics became just another band. Now, this is why I really want bands to make new stuff. I don't have to connect with the new stuff. I don't have to like the new stuff. And for some of this album, I definitely don't. But what I need is a band to make new material. Otherwise, they become a museum. And I'm not old enough to go in a museum, and I don't think I ever want to, because the future is being written one day at a time. We are all time travelers going forward into the future, 1 second per second, and we should live in the moment, and we shouldn't be thinking about what happened 20 or 30 years ago. Yes, understand your history, don't forget your history, but at the same point, don't be defined by it. Move along from what it is. As Richie said in one of his very last interviews, regrets are meaningless, there is only today. I can change today, and that is what I will do. So released on the 13th of April 2018, Resistance is Futile, I think it's their 12th or 13th album, is just another Manics record. Now, just another Manics record makes it lots better than some bands' entire careers, by the way, but that doesn't mean it's going to be fabulous. It sold 24,000 copies. It got to number 2 in the charts. It was the first post-Trump and post-Brexit LP. So I was out there thinking, surely if you're a band that responds to world events and the things that are happening in the world around you, those are two pretty major kind of events around populism, authoritarianism, reductionism and simplicity in modern politics that are worth kind of commenting upon. You wouldn't have a clue by listening to this that is what has happened at all. As Nicky Royer said, if the new songs aren't good enough, they won't come out. But these songs, I don't think they really were that good, but they came out anyway. Whereas Futurology and Rewind the Film were such a burst of creativity, maybe it felt like they drained the band of things to say. Now, that was 4 years ago. Had they not thought of anything new to say in the previous 4 years? Had they not got any ideas or any observations to pass upon the world and the state of the world and everything that had happened in the meantime? Probably not, because some of these songs, although they call them obsessively melodic, are not particularly good. So there's an element of, I think, art as refuge and inspiration. There's an element of memory and loss and around forgotten history and confused reality in the lyrics, but it's not a stunning artistic statement. I mean, looking at the cover, I'm not quite sure what that's trying to signify. I'm sure a trained academic will be able to tell you that it is something around some cultural reference I am not familiar with, and that's okay. But at the same point, is it sorry for blinding you there, is it a cover that's designed to kind of call back to a forgotten time in history when things like dignity and integrity mattered? Because if it is, it's a very, very subtle kind of commentary upon it. And then the idea about resistance is futile. Is that a commentary upon trying to hold back the turning of the tides and the passing of history? Is that the thing that's futile? What is it that the album is actually trying to articulate? And it's not really sure, I don't think. The album was preceded with a single, the first track to be released from the album, the second track on the album, and the only one to get a physical commercial release, International Blue. Here it is on blue vinyl, 7-inch single, backed with a track called Holding Patterns. And International Blue is, in my opinion, that's quite exciting, isn't it? I put that over the light and it makes me look different. Sorry, International Blue is not a great Manic song. It's just another Manic song. It was written during the end period of the Futurology album and released as a download on the 8th of December 2017. It didn't get a commercial physical release. Instead, you got a 7-inch that was shrink wrapped with indie store versions of the album. So the only way to get the single was to buy the album on vinyl from an indie store. So if you're a record collector doing a Manics Pokemon, you've got to catch them all. That is what you had to do in order to have the album and in order to have the single. But you kind of look at it and go, well, it's backed with Holding Patterns. Is that any good? No, not really. Holding Patterns are what I thought, or what I felt the Manics actually as a band were in at that point in time. It's about, Holding Pattern is an airplane that's circling before a runway becomes free. It's effectively what the Manics are sort of doing themselves. A band that kind of sort of repeats themselves, that makes a record because that's the thing that they do, that mistakes saying something for having something to say, and not necessarily having anything new to say or any new observations to impart. As you know, I've always been a massive lyrics guy. To me, lyrics have got to grab you by the scruff of the throat and go, listen to this. And then you suddenly kind of like you've been hit with a bolt of light, like, you know, Elwood Blues or Jake Blues in the church, in the Blues Brothers will go, hallelujah, I've seen the light. This song's lyrics have helped me understand the world that I live in. And sometimes they just don't, because the lyrics aren't very good. And you kind of go, well, what's the point of having lyrics in the song? Now, some bands, terrible at lyrics. The Manics have written some of the best songs of all time. This Is Yesterday, for example, The Girl Who Wanted to Be God, The Everlasting. I'm deliberately staying away from the earlier songs. Motorcycle Emptiness, Hibernation. These are all phenomenal songs. Amazing lyrics. And you get something like People Give In, which is the first track on the album. And it's just not very good, is it? Really. So International Blue, written during the end of Futurology, is the song that's probably the closest link between Futurology and Resistance Is Futile. I think it was originally penned during the B-side sessions for Futurology, but what that does mean effectively is you've got a song that is, by the time it went onto a Manics album, was 4 years old, and that is an awful long time for a song to sit on a shelf. The second song released from the album is Distant Colours, track 3 on the album. It's a lyric by James Dean Bradfield, and Distant Colours, by the way, is a lyric that kind of talks about the disenchantment with politics. So whilst it's not obviously post-Trump, post-Brexit, it's got a lyric that is a little bit clearer around, for example, the concept of, I no longer know my left from right between your hopes and fears and my choice to decide. And you kind of go, it's not clear where it sits. It's just saying, politics is a bit tricky at the moment. And I would be hoping for a lyric that perhaps would be a little bit more precise than that. So there was a concern probably around politics, about a disenchantment with Labour that had been kind of fudging around trying to get elected, around old Labour versus new Labour, about people don't understand history, the idea that once history passes out of human memory, it then becomes nebulous, and then you have an opportunity for things like populism and authoritarianism to rise, and it's easy to confuse some people with all people. So, for example, that statement about Brexit, which is, not all people that voted for a particular party, or not all racists, for example, voted for a particular party, but all people that were racist voted for a particular party, if that makes sense. I probably inarticulately, probably incorrectly explained that. Not all people that voted for the party were racist, but all racists voted for the party, for example, is probably the better way of describing it. And then it's a good lyric. It's not an amazing lyric. I can't remember the song at all. Now, I should do that, considering I listened to the album earlier, but I'm kind of sat there going, no, not really got it. And then we have the third single that was released from the album, track 5 on the album, Dylan and Caitlin, which is a great song about, I think, Dylan Thomas and Caitlin and the relationship that existed between the two. So it's Vivian Mayer, I think, is the... no, not Vivian Mayer. Caitlin is character-based, Caitlin Thomas and Dylan Thomas, which was a relationship that was fueled by booze and infidelity. And that, obviously, following in from the cliche about damaged people, is that these were people that were abusive to each other, but at the same point flawed and difficult and trying to navigate their path through life in whatever form it came. And it became, I mean, certainly I had an experience of that. I was in a short relationship with somebody who was an alcoholic, and I mean, like, Olympic standard, Richard Burton level alcoholic. I've not really talked about that on this, so probably I should do, in so much as I thought that they were a kindred spirit to me and they were quite wild. And sometimes that's really liberating. It's really exciting, because you kind of go, this is a person that's going to have a really exciting life. And then what you realise is it's only exciting when you're watching it. It's not exciting when you're living it. When you're living it, it's like being strapped into a roller coaster that you can't get off. And the person in question had moved from drinking a little bit to losing their job because they were drinking. And then whilst I was going to work and carrying everything financially myself, wasn't looking for another job, and instead was timing down the hours after they got up until midday so they could drink, because it was then the afternoon, and drinking in the morning was a bad thing, but drinking in the afternoon was okay. I'd frequently come back from work and that person would have disappeared. Their phone would have been off. I didn't know where they were. I didn't know what they were doing. I had come to the suspicion that they were in the pub with somebody that they later went to live with, I think. And I was fully expecting on any given night for them not to come home. And I was fully expecting to just get on the door and 2 policemen to be telling me that the person who was my wife had died in a car crash. And I wasn't even going to be upset about that. I was just going to be relieved, because I was living with this awful kind of situation that I didn't like and didn't enjoy, and found myself somehow kind of shackled to a person that I was in no way compatible with. And it was a really difficult situation to be in. And I might talk about that in another episode, but that's probably just enough detail for now. But the song Dylan and Caitlin was obviously about 2 people that were in a relationship that was alcoholic. There was a lot of infidelity. There was a lot of abuse, misuse, and kind of callous behaviour, where the people didn't respect themselves or anybody else. And whilst it's a really interesting, good song as a character study, it's not an easy song for me to listen to, so I don't listen to it very often. What I will also say about Dylan and Caitlin, by the way, is that it does have a female vocal on it from the anchoress, who is one of my favourite female artists, and who I rate very, very highly indeed. And so it's a shame, really, that this song is so difficult for me to listen to because of the subject matter, compared to obviously what I was hoping that it could be something that I could find more joy out of. It's just a song that when I listen to it, I get flashed back to a certain point in my life that I was really unhappy in. So yes, there you go. Let's go into the album. So the album, 13th of April, 2018. Lots of different editions. This is I think the Indies version, heavyweight white vinyl, gatefold sleeve, and there's a picture of some guys in the band. That's whitish, right? whitish, maybe, I think. And it is on the standard edition of the album, 12 tracks, but there are 3 different configurations of the record, of which I have 2. There is the 12-track standard CD and vinyl. In fact, there's the Indies vinyl, which also contains the 7-inch plus holding patterns. There's the Japanese version of the album that contains 3 bonus tracks. One is holding patterns, one is a track called Mirror Gaze, and the other one is a remix of International Blue. And then there is the standard 2 CD deluxe edition of the album here, which contains demos and extra tracks. So there's the demos of the 12 album tracks on here, plus an extra couple of non-album tracks, being Concrete Fields and a soundtrack to complete Withdrawal. So let's go for those. And so let's start. Track 1, side 1, People Give In, which was released as a single on the 27th of July 2018. But singles are an abstract concept at this point. You can't buy them unless you buy a download. There's no B-sides necessarily, which is kind of weird. And then what's the point? It's just, you know, the line between what is and isn't a single anymore has become very, very blurry. Is it just that, well, they've done a film for it? And if they've done a film for it and it gets loaded to YouTube, is that actually a single, or is it just a video? You know, where's it go? And it's not exactly clear what the relationship is between that song and it being a single at all. I mean, does a TV appearance on This Morning with whoever, or you know, Sunday Brunch, is that the thing that makes it a single these days? Because it gets a little bit hairy as to what actually constitutes a single when you get to this point in the band's career, and at this point in the weird and unusual commercial world of purchase power. So People Give In is the 4th single from the album, released on the 27th of July 2018, if it is such a thing as a single. And I must admit, I'm not a fan of this. It's a very one-dimensional song. It has, I absolutely love drama and dynamics in a song. I think those are absolutely great, where you've got the point where, you know, the song has a lift, it has a chorus, it has changes tempo, it's got memorable elements to it. People Give In has an album closer, or as an album opener, and as a starting song, as a single, is very much here we are. It's not going to grab you by the scruff of the neck and go, this song is amazing. There's nothing about it that says opening track to an album. There's no steady bringing of instruments. There's no, you know, fast attention-grabbing tempo. It just starts with a drum beat, and then a guitar, and then some bass. And that's it. And there's no sense that, oh boy, this one's going to be a ride. It's just a song. And the lyric is not great, really. It's just one of these list songs. And I don't like list songs. I know Roger Waters loves list songs, but I don't like list songs because effectively they normally just have a prefix of people and then a set people, action, feeling. So tired, old, forgotten, sold, down, move on, can't cope, stay strong, get happy, get lost, cave inwards, lose trust. That's it. And it's like, I don't really understand what that lyric is trying to tell you, apart from the fact that people go through changing emotions and everything changes but you. You know, we've said goodbye, the taxi cab is waiting. As Take That's finest single. Yes, Everything Changes is Take That's finest single. Let me think that one through. Yep, no, it is. Yeah. And then obviously track 2 is International Blue, which is, again, a song about, well, I don't really know what it's about. And that's difficult for me to say. I mean, kind of when you listen to a lyric and you kind of go, well, what is the song about? And if you kind of shrug and go, the answer is, why are you making the bloody song if you don't know what it's about? Now, that sounds harsh. It's not meant to sound harsh. I hold the Manics to very high standards because I think that at one point they were one of the very best bands on the planet. They're a band that changed my life. They helped my life. They made my life make more sense than it did before they came into the group, before they came into my life. And therefore, now we're at a point where I'm kind of sat there and kind of going, I'm not getting the same thing. It's not that I've changed, because fundamentally I'm just an older version of the 15-year-old me who's slightly smarter and slightly more thoughtful. What's changed is that the band have changed and I haven't changed in the same direction as the band. some of these songs, it feels are being made out of habit as opposed to being made out of necessity. And you kind of go, well, if that's why you're making songs, you probably shouldn't make songs for that reason. You should wait until you've got something to say. Can you hear that guy? That's the cat. I'm going to put this on pause. I'm going to open the door so he can come in if that's what he wants to do. You might see him in a minute. Probably won't though, knowing him. Right. I've opened the door, so if the cat wants to come in, he can. Now that the door's open, he almost definitely won't want to go through it, because that's how cats work. If you've got cats, you know I'm speaking the truth. Although, of course, right now, as I've said it, he probably will wander in, then wander out. So, yeah, where we are. Track 5 is Vivian, which is about a photographer called Vivian Mayer. And again, this has backing vocals by the anchoress on. And what I do like is obviously the idea that writing songs about things, although there is an element of going, well, actually, I'm writing a song as an exercise about something that I'm interested in, as opposed to writing something that's a genuine expression of an emotion or an idea. It's pretty odd, which is why there's a Frank Turner album called No Man's Land, where every song is about historical women, and I'm kind of sat there going, that's pretty much an album of mansplaining, and I'm not connecting to it, because I listen to songs for what they can do for me. And so it's kind of like reading a history book set to a guitar, which is not really kind of how I'm going to work. You can come in if you want. Then we've got Dylan and Caitlin. Track 6 is called Liverpool Revisited, which I think was released as a kind of preview single-ish on the 6th of April 2018. It's a eulogy for Liverpool and for Hillsborough. And Liverpool is had the issue with the Hillsborough football tragedy, 97 people that died as a consequence of that, a scar which sits upon the city. Liverpool was lied about by the Sun newspaper. There was also a song on This Is Not My Truth, Tell Me Yours, called South Yorkshire Mass Murderer, which talks about the idea of the people in positions of authority and influence that made bad decisions that then caused people to die as a result through that. It was written, I think, one morning when I think Nicky Wire had got up one day, and he walked through the city of Liverpool whilst on tour, and then he wrote his impressions of that and how that would work. I mean, obviously, aside from Beatles band, Liverpool is an important city in Britain, and it is one that, like Birmingham and like Sheffield, tends to have been written out of the history of the nation. So you think about some of the big cities that we have in the UK, people don't tend to really think about them as being important. They think London and Manchester and Glasgow are maybe the important cities, and you kind of go, well, you've got Birmingham, you've got Sheffield, you've got Liverpool, you've got Cardiff, all these cities that seem to have been just sidelined on their way out by other people. Come in. Cats, eh? Maybe I should call him Brexit. Track 7 is called, and I need to scroll through that. Oh, that's a nice picture of some guys. Again, I don't know what that picture's meant to be. It's called Sequels of Forgotten Wars. And there will be no parades for the like of us. The wars we fought are doomed to be lost. Strange song, really about, it's kind of like a sense of being, when you're an outsider. And again, when I was talking about Liverpool, Birmingham, Sheffield, for example, these are towns that seem in cultural terms to have been marginalised. And the idea of being an outsider, feeling like you don't necessarily really belong in a place or in a city. Like, I've never really felt like I've belonged in anywhere I've ever been. It just always has felt like I'm somehow slightly a square peg trying to be jammed into a round hole. And that's an unusual thing to do. But again, at the same point, you can't do anything about it. Sometimes you have to go where the weather suits your clothes, as the song has it. And it's a good song, but it's not like an amazing song. And that's the problem that we'll get with a lot of songs on this album, is they're all on their own, individually, very serviceable, very adequate. They do their job, but they don't kind of suddenly kind of burrow into my brain as a song that I'm going to be listening to. And when I flick through my Rolodex of my top 20 Manic songs, there's going to be nothing on this album that really covers that. We have Hold Me Like a Heaven, Again, the 5th single, although as I said before, the concept of a single is somewhat murky and foggy, to be released from the album on the 4th of May 2018. Apparently inspired by David Bowie's Ashes to Ashes, Philip Larkin's Lines on a Young Lady's Photograph album. It's a pop song, it's built on a drum loop, it's quite basic, it's quite monotone. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's kind of like very rigid, but it doesn't really have any peaks, or it doesn't really have any troughs either. It's just another pretty good Manic single. And you're kind of sat there going, I'm not quite, what does Hold Me Like a Heaven, what's it actually about? And I don't quite know. Again, I'm not quite sure what some of these lyrics are for. But that said, there is a fabulous remix by Public Service Broadcasting, and I think Public Service Broadcasting are absolutely great, a really brilliant band, and you should like them, or at least listen to them. And you may or may not like them. Track 9 is In Eternity. It's a song about Nicky Wire's memories of David Bowie, who obviously had died 2.5 years before the album came out. His lyric about, for example, I fell in love with you 1,000,000 times, your clothes, your hair, and the sweetest of smiles. We'll never see the like of you again. The idea of, and then the lyric about in eternity, the king and queen of style, kind of misquoting deliberately the fabulous track Heroes, of course. So it's a song about how there's that gap between who somebody is and who they exist to be in the public eye, and how do those two kind of operate together. Then we have number 10, which is Broken Algorithms. It is an angry, angular thing. It's probably the nearest thing to a vibrant rock track, where you get the sense these are 3 or 4 guys in a room banging out a racket, screaming at the world. It's angry, it's angular. It doesn't necessarily belong on the album, but it's a great track. But again, there's one like it on every Manics record. There really is. And then we have A Song for Sadness. Now, A Song for Sadness is apparently a song about Nicky Wire's record collection. I've written a lot of songs about my record collection. I think of my record collection as being a small personal museum of mass-produced modern art, as you can probably tell by the walls behind me. It's about all the songs that have come to mean so much to you over the years. Songs that we've left behind, songs that we've taken with us, the role that you are as a fan of a band, the relationship you have with the band or those individuals that they don't even know exist, that they're completely oblivious to. It's about knowing that, for example, sometimes all you will leave behind are memories and traces. And to misquote the wonderful line in Stay Beautiful, as the reviewer for Stay Beautiful for the NME had it, he thought the lyric was all we love are lonely records, where it was all we love is lonely wreckage. I prefer lonely records, it's a better line. But it kind of touches upon that as well, and the idea of kind of those records being that map that guides you through the future that you're experiencing to whatever is on the other side of it. And that's how I see about my records. Is to me, these aren't just records. This is art, and art is something which I interpret and take with me. I have a relationship with it that exists just between me and that particular object, and then that is something which I will sometimes will change my life and change how I see the world. And I'm still at the point now where I'm still finding bands as recently as a few years ago, I think of the best bands I've ever heard that have done records that I've suddenly gone, where has this band been all my life? And it's wonderful and it's exhilarating to do it. And if any of you know me in my non-NOTCAST years or non-NOTCAST environment, probably one of my favourite band that I've discovered recently in the past few years is the Twilight Sad from lovely Scotland that make this amazing noise that just sounds like the roar inside my head. And I've never met a Twilight Sad song I didn't love. So that's a recommendation. I did see them supporting the Manics in 2014 as well. Last song on the album is The Left Behind, and that is around really the concept of the aging of time, the passing of the baton from generation to generation, as you suddenly realise you're now part of the old guard, you're part of the establishment, you're a national treasure, you're an old man living in a young man's world, you're a cassette in the Spotify generation. And it's kind of like thinking about, well, what are you going to be and who are you going to do and what's your relationship going to be? And when you know that the time has gone and that the song is over and there's nothing more left to say, and you kind of go, well, maybe I'm the left behind. It also ties in with the biblical theme about being left behind, the idea of when the rapture comes, the true believers will ascend to heaven, and those that are left behind, the heathens that do not believe, will then have to suffer the ravages of the apocalypse. Very biblical indeed. And then that's your standard 12-track album, and there's your photo that appears on the inner sleeve. Your second CD, of course, contains demo versions of these tracks, and those, depending on how you want to think about them, are fascinating alternate versions or useless sound-alikes. I prefer to think of them as fascinating alternate versions where the production tricks of the album perhaps don't necessarily apply. Since Resistance is Futile was released in a number of formats, I had to buy it from a number of places. So I bought the white vinyl and the 7-inch from my local indie store, and then from the band's website the deluxe edition with 2 CDs that was signed by all 3 members of the band at that point. On the deluxe version there are also 2 extra songs, so you don't get demos of these, you just get your standard full band versions of Concrete Fields and a soundtrack to complete withdrawal. Concrete Fields is probably the best way to describe it, and I've written it down on a piece of paper, is a song about nostalgia and those that aren't nostalgic about the sense of things changing, who no longer have a concept of being home. Whereas a soundtrack to complete withdrawal is a very different song. Actually, it sounds like it comes from the futurology sessions, as opposed to Resistance is Futile. That is the Manics' umpteenth studio album, Resistance is Futile, released in 2018. Now, I saw the band once on this tour. I used to go and see them 8 or 9 times, but I didn't enjoy seeing them anymore. I didn't enjoy seeing them because every show felt like it was the same. They'd play the same 12 to 15 singles. They'd play about 3 songs from the new album, 1 old album track, and it was kind of like seeing a Welsh AC/DC. Not in itself a criticism, but when you've seen what is basically 85% the same show for the past 15 years, it gets to the point where you're kind of going, I want something else. I want something different. And I did get, unfortunately, I did get a bit of vitriol from this chap here on Twitter, because my review was less than glowing about the band when I saw them at the Royal Festival Hall in 2018, who came up with a whole bunch of assumptions. I think there's a power dynamic between bands and fans, and I think that maybe pointing out someone's review that you don't agree with and going, this guy is whatever it is, I think he's deleted his Twitter so I can't even remember it now, I think it's, all opinions are valid, and I think it's pretty unfair actually if you're in a band to point out somebody whose review you don't like and then go and tell this guy lots of rude things, because that's what happened. The people that think that the band are gods amongst men that have unquestionably perfect taste and never put a foot wrong are right, and somebody that points out maybe not, this isn't quite so good, are people to be monstered and vilified, and it felt quite unfair really. But at the end of the day, people have the right to be wrong, including me. You have the right to disagree with me. I'm sure some of you do. That's absolutely lovely. Thank you if you do. Questioning everything is as bad as questioning nothing. You should reach your own conclusions, do your own research. Watching me on YouTube doesn't count as research, by the way. But what you should do is you need to be discerning in the information and to be able to interpret the things that are there. So I'm not responsible for how anybody else interprets anything that I say. I'm only responsible for what I say and the messages which I send out. That's the message that I sent. That is the things that I meant, saying no and meaning yes, as to quote the great Bowies, I can't give everything away. But it's around that kind of thing, is going, ultimately we're all responsible for our own actions. I'm not responsible for if people get annoyed about me saying things about a record that they don't like, as I've seen from the Roger Waters video where I said don't buy the Roger Waters album, and lots of people pointed out to me that I was bald, and I was half tempted to go, what, really? I had no idea. Well, I sat there just going, yeah, you dumb fucks, and block and delete, or the algorithm just throws it into the bin and I never get to see it. Both are good. But I just kind of thought, well, if you're in a band and you've been in a band for a long time and you're very successful, it doesn't really matter what other people think. At the end of the day, if you're doing anything to get other people's approval, you're probably not doing it for the right reasons. You should be making records or creating art with the idea of expressing something that's absolutely burning inside of you, that cannot wait to come out and cannot be contained, as if the song itself is kind of bubbling out of your skin and you have no choice but to let that song out. And then you kind of go on some of the songs on this album, that's not how it felt. Now that sounds a little harsh, but that's how I saw it. I listened to this and I'm kind of sat there sometimes going, if you don't know why you're making this, I don't know why I'm listening to it. Because art and the ability to make art, to create art, is a privilege. There are lots of people that would want to have the opportunity to be able to make a mass-released number 2 record that have fantastic ideas and vision. And it seems to me a little weird to squander an opportunity sometimes on a song that is inarticulate or unclear or not perhaps the best one that you can make. I get that sometimes people have good days and bad days. I've had good years, I've had bad years. I've had bad years creatively, I've had bad years professionally, where sometimes things just aren't really gelling. Obviously you need to do those and get through those years, but at the same point, I haven't gone through those years and said to anyone, yeah, it's my best album ever. This is not the best Manics album ever. It's good, but it's just another Manics album, and there's plenty of those to choose from. It's probably going to be $3.99 in the Christmas sales if you want to pick it up, and it's quite good for that. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. The other thing, which I found perhaps less than absolutely thrilling as a Manics fan, was 2019, where they did the 20th anniversary collector's edition of This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours, and then followed it up with another tour where they played the album once again in full, in sequence, in order. And I just sat there going, I'm sick of nostalgia tours. I'd seen the band in 1994, 1996 and 1998 when these albums were fresh, seeing them in 2014, 2016, 2019 when these albums were old enough to vote and get laid. And I just kind of sat there thinking, I don't need to be reminded of that. I'm interested in what's going on now, because when people look back at what happened in 2019 as the Manics, they go, well, we played a 20-year-old album. And I'm kind of sat there going, so you didn't have anything new to say? Or perhaps even when you're touring and you're touring a 20-year-old album, from one point of view, you can kind of go, well, you haven't really got the conviction to stand behind the album that you made last year. And you'd rather sell tickets on the back of reminding people about how good you used to be. And you glorify the past because the future dies up. Or, of course, as an old Manic song has it, nostalgic puss heads. So it sounds like I'm giving them a kicking. Genuinely, I'm not. It's coming from a place of love. Every time I put a Manics record on the turntable, I want to be blown away. I want to be blown away by how amazing it is, about how all the walls turn to glass, about how my perception of reality has changed, how I've experienced something new that I've never experienced before, and I'm sat there going, wow. And it doesn't happen as often as I'd like it to. Occasionally there's little songs or there's little bits where I kind of go, oh, that's really good. But then there's other bits where I go, I've heard this before. I've heard this before 10, 12 times over the past 30 years, and you're not saying anything new. So that sounds like I'm giving the band a kicking. I probably am. But remember, it comes from a place of love. I hold the bands I love to a higher standard than I do the bands I don't, because the bands I loved changed my life. And they often meant everything and anything to me. And I would dearly love them to be able to be part of the soundtrack of my future as I listen to the new stuff. And I kind of go, that's helping me through this life today, here and now in 2023 and for the years to come. Resistance is Futile is not that album. So I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful. And I will see you soon, where I will talk about a band that isn't the Manics, and hopefully in a more positive light. So see you later. Okay, bye.